Okay, picture this. Evening of February 23rd, 2022. Denys Karlovskyi, he's a young Ukrainian journalist, and his biggest worry right then, it's the silence from Oxford admissions about his Blavatnik school application. Just waiting for that email. Typical student anxiety, right? That high-stakes waiting game. But then just hours later, that specific tension doesn't just break, it's completely obliterated, annihilated by the sound of incoming missiles. His whole academic world, his life, just violently shattered.
And that contrast, that whiplash from academic stress to actual existential threat,
Yep.
that's really what we're diving into today. Our sources map out this incredible journey from the raw, visceral reality of war to the, let's say, aspirational world of elite universities like Oxford and Cambridge. We're looking at the unprecedented support systems that had to snap into place, and maybe even more importantly, the sheer personal strength of the students who made that leap.
Because the invasion just tore through everything for a whole generation. For Karlovsky, the change was instant. Terrifying. Forget public policy studies. He's woken up by explosions, grabs one backpack, and ends up working with his colleagues at Ukrainska Pravda. And they were apparently on a target list. So he goes from studying policy to working, 10, 12 hours a day. Daily and nightly, he said, reporting on air raids, missile strikes, mass graves near Kiev. He actually called it the darkest and lowest period of his life, understandably.
Yeah, and his story it just puts a human face on this national catastrophe for Ukrainian students. I mean, the simple act of learning, of going to university, suddenly became life-threatening. University life just stopped brutally. It wasn't just disruption, it was for some total destruction. By early 2024, estimates suggested something like 15% of the actual buildings, the infrastructure of Ukrainian universities, had been seriously damaged or just destroyed. And that 15%, that's not just cosmetic damage. We're talking labs, libraries, administrative hubs, the very core of how you teach and do research. Gone.
Okay, so let's unpack the first huge challenge. Actually getting these students out of Ukraine and into a lecture hall in the UK. I mean, what a logistical nightmare that must have been. The physical journey alone, harrowing. We read about Anastasia Zagoruchik. Took her 24 hours just to escape Kiev. But then came the bureaucracy, like hitting a wall, right?
Absolutely. The main official route initially was the UK government's Homes for Ukraine sponsorship scheme. Now, that scheme was vital. It gave them the right to live, work, study. But think about the requirements if you're literally fleeing for your life. You needed to find someone in the UK, an approved sponsor, before you could apply. And then you had to somehow get to a visa center, often in another country, to give your biometric data.
Wow, just imagine that. You're running from bombs. Maybe you don't have family with you, maybe patchy internet, missing documents, and you're trying to navigate this incredibly complex visa process in, likely, a foreign language just to get an appointment.
Exactly. It's why Professor Lionel Tarasenko at Oxford, who was deeply involved in setting up their scholarship, he called the fact that the first group arrived on time a further miracle. And notice that word, miracle. It underscores just how unlikely it all was. He specifically mentioned it required some help from the Home Office with a couple of difficult visa cases.
Right, so even the official system needed a push.
It really did. It just highlights how thin the line was between getting sanctuary and, well, the system wasn't built for this kind of crisis, not seamlessly anyway.
Which makes the ground support even more critical then. It wasn't just government schemes and universities, there was this whole other layer, wasn't there?
Oh, definitely. This sort of third layer of sanctuary, grassroots action. Groups like the British Red Cross stepped up massively. They were providing guidance, interpretation in Ukrainian and Russian on everything. Visas, yes, but also practical stuff like how to get kids into local schools.
And that local support must have been so important for just settling in.
Hugely important. You saw local authorities, like in Devon, for example, they welcomed over 1,000 Ukrainian kids. They set up special maths help, thousands of hours of bilingual support for everyday things, parent-teacher meetings, you name it. So it was really this combination, wasn't it? Government policy, university initiatives, and that crucial community goodwill. That's what made it possible to go from refugee to student.
And the speed of the universities themselves, Oxford and Cambridge, often seen as these ancient, maybe slow-moving giants. But here they acted with remarkable speed and clarity. Take Oxford. The full-scale invasion starts late February 2022. By May, just 2 months later, they launched their graduate scholarship scheme for Ukrainians. That's fast.
It really is. Professor Tarasenko described the timeline as almost impossible. They reopened admissions in May, advertised the scheme in June, sorted through nearly 900 applications, selected 26 scholars by July. And these students arrived in October for fully funded master's courses. Fees, accommodation, a living grant, all covered.
That speed is amazing. But, doing a deep dive, we should ask. This intense focus on helping the very top students, the ones able to apply to Oxbridge, was that the best strategy? Or did it maybe pull resources or focus away from supporting the broader Ukrainian university system, the regional places that also need help?
That's a really important question to ask. It's a valid critique. The counterargument, I suppose, is that this was about preserving future intellectual leadership. And crucially, this speed was fueled by external funding. Oxford, for instance, got significant backing from XTX markets, over £600,000. That commitment allowed them to make the program sustainable, even increase the living stipend to £10,000. So it wasn't necessarily draining core university funds.
Okay, that makes sense. And Cambridge had a similar ambition, but maybe a slightly different approach, more sector-wide.
Yeah, Cambridge aimed explicitly at helping the Ukrainian higher education sector continue to operate. A key part was this twinning agreement, their School of Clinical Medicine made with Kharkiv National Medical University. They brought 22 medical students over for 7-week clinical placements.
So practical continuity for their training when their own facilities were likely damaged or inaccessible.
Exactly. Plus, Cambridge expanded an existing scholarship, the Rowan Williams Studentship, for students from conflict zones. And they also attracted major donations, like $3 million from Ken Griffin for STEM students through the Ukraine Math and Science Achievement Fund.
So looking at the overall goal here, it's pretty clear this wasn't just about charity, was it? It feels more like a strategic educational soft power.
I think that's fair. The language used by both universities, Building Back Better, points to that.
Okay.
The explicit hope, the aim, was that these scholars, equipped with this world-class education, would eventually go back to Ukraine and, quote, contribute to the reconstruction of their country. It's a definite long-term investment in Ukraine's future.
Okay, let's shift to the admissions process itself. Getting into Oxford or Cambridge is fiercely competitive anyway. We're talking top grades like AAA, huge numbers of applicants per place. And these students were applying while potentially living in basements, hearing air raid sirens. How did that even work?
Well, the universities had to adapt fast. Cambridge, for example, waived the £60 application fee. Seems small, but crucial when you've lost everything. Oxford added a box to their online application to identify refugee status. If you ticked that and met the academic bar, it triggered the scholarship invitation. So logistical fixes were put in place.
But the mental toll?
Exactly. Fixing the logistics doesn't fix the trauma. Karlovskyi mentioned his scholarship interview. He felt he was grappling to collect his ideas, thought he fared pretty badly. His mind was still reeling from everything he'd experienced.
That cognitive load must have been immense.
Unimaginable.
Yeah.
And even getting the acceptance. It wasn't pure joy. Victoria Podvorchatska said when she got the news, yes, it was life-changing, but instantly followed by, my family is back in Kyiv. There is a lot to be concerned about. That joy is always mixed with fear for loved ones. They exist simultaneously.
It feels like this whole situation forced these institutions, maybe without explicitly stating it, to sort of redefine what merit means. Yes, academic excellence was still key. They chose 26 from almost 900 at Oxford, but the fact they could perform at that level under those conditions, that speaks to something deeper, doesn't it? Resilience, determination.
Absolutely. A different kind of merit, forged in crisis. And that resilience is essential because the psychological challenges don't stop when they arrive in the UK. They live in what one student called 2 different universes. There's the immense weight of survivor's guilt knowing they're safe while friends, family are still in danger daily. That creates profound isolation.
Yeah, I read about that, making even simple social interactions incredibly difficult. Sophia, another student, talked about being asked, casually, how was your Christmas? And how do you answer that honestly? Her real answer involved hiding in a bomb shelter. You can't just drop that into small talk. It's too raw, too alienating for peers whose biggest Christmas worry might have been flight delays.
And on top of that deep emotional strain, you have practical academic hurdles, things beyond just feeling overwhelmed. Language is often the first barrier people mention. They might have good conversational English, but the highly specific technical vocabulary in lectures or seminars, that can be intimidating. Leads to students staying quiet in class, as one said, so as not to look stupid, which hinders their learning and participation, obviously.
And then there's something called curriculum shock. What's that about?
It's about the difference in teaching styles. Ukrainian education traditionally relies quite heavily on structured printed textbooks. You have your core texts. In the UK system, especially at Oxbridge, it's often more about extensive reading lists, lots of digital resources, more diffuse sources. For students used to the textbook system, that lack of a single physical anchor can be really anxiety-inducing. It's a cultural shift in how knowledge is presented.
Plus, many are dealing with dual enrollment, right? Attending Oxbridge and trying to keep up with their home university online.
Yes, an incredible pressure. Trying to follow lectures or submit work for their Ukrainian university, often battling power cuts and unreliable internet back home because of the ongoing attacks. So they're fighting battles on two fronts, navigating a new, demanding academic system in the UK and grappling with the logistical chaos of wartime education back home simultaneously.
It's just staggering. And yet, despite all this, their focus seems incredibly strong. They're not just passively receiving help.
Not at all. They are very much agents. You see student groups like the Cambridge University Ukrainian Society, CUS, they're incredibly active, organizing weekly protests, raising awareness, collaborating to send support back home. There's a real sense of mission.
That sense of purpose comes through clearly. Karlovskyi at Oxford now sees his studies directly linked to Ukraine's future.
He framed it as a life-changing chance to acquire all the skills, knowledge, and connections I need to help my country withstand the aftershocks of the war. And he's thinking very strategically, mentioning the need to address future PTSD crises, economic fallout, political instability. It's mission-driven education.
So, if we tie this all together, this whole situation, this crisis, it seems to have changed things on both sides. The universities were forced to act with a speed and agility they don't usually show.
Definitely. And the students themselves, they brought this incredibly urgent, real-world perspective on geopolitics, on resilience, right into the heart of these, sometimes quite rarefied academic environments. It's been a reciprocal impact, I think.
Absolutely. The whole story, from that first terrible night, through the journey, the bureaucracy, the academic pressure, to finally walking into those halls, it really is a testament to hope, isn't it? And maybe the strategic value of investing in people.
It really is. And, that selection process, even not explicitly designed this way, it ended up recognizing something more than just grades achieved under normal circumstances. It implicitly valued character, resilience, that sense of mission we talked about.
Which does leave you with a pretty big question, doesn't it?
I think so. Moving forward, how can the global education system, and not just when there's a war on how can it adapt its ways of measuring potential, how do we get better at consistently recognizing and valuing that deep capacity for excellence that people demonstrate when they overcome immense adversity, when they rise from existential threat?
It's a powerful challenge. Asking if maybe true excellence isn't just about aptitude, but also about the sheer grit it takes to realize that aptitude under fire. Well, we hope this deep dive into how educational soft power works and the strategic investment in Ukraine's intellectual future has given you plenty to think about.